Welcome back to the Birdhouse Dynasty Show and our first part of our three-part edition titled Moneyball. Today is part one, ADV, or Artificial Dynasty Value. Yes, ADV, Artificial Dynasty Value. Now, what in the world are we talking about with ADV? What does that mean? Well, there's three main ADVs that I find very useful when I'm trying to put together a roster, trying to evaluate trades, trying to piece together trades, going to the lab, trying to fiddle with the calculators, or just simply scouring through my fellow league mates' rosters and trying to pick out some pieces that my league mates may not find as valuable as I do, or some pieces on my roster that I may think that others in my league may find more valuable than I do. Therefore, they should be on their roster instead of mine, right? So, anyway, first first type of ADV that I want to get into is second and third year players that are overvalued simply because they're in their second or third year. Okay. Now, this may be because they came into the league as an older fifth year senior. So they came into the league as a 23 or 24-year-old rookie, or they may have, you know, come in as a 21-year-old and they were simply overhyped and they can't figure out the NFL and it's really just too much for them. But yet, for some reason, seems that we want to push them up above some veteran who's actually done something on the field. And what are we all playing this game of Dynasty for? Right? That is the main question you need to ask and understand that the number one reason we play is not to have the most valuable roster. Absolutely, will it help you? It should if you do have the most valuable roster in your league, yes. But how do you turn the most valuable roster into an actual dynasty, an actual contender year after year after year? It's not by hanging on to second and third year players that aren't producing shit on your roster. Okay. What I'm getting at are the guys like Kendre Miller and Zach Charbonnet and those. Now, they may serve a purpose. For instance, Zach Charbonnet definitely was useful this year when Kenneth Walker was out, for sure. But does that mean he should be worth 3,800 points right now on Keep Trade Cut? Just merely a few hundred less than Kenneth Walker? I'm I'm just he's just an example. I don't have anything personal or against Zach Charbonnet. I just think that when you look up Zach Charbonnet and compare him to James Conner, who do you think is going to score more points in the 2025 season for you? Zach Charbonnet or James Conner? It's a real simple question, and it's not that loaded. James Conner is probably the RB1 in Arizona next year, even if they draft a running back. The only way that he's not the RB1 is if they take one of the top three running backs in the draft. And I really doubt they're doing that since they just drafted Trey Benson last year. Wouldn't put it past them from taking a running back. But the point remains that James Conner is definitely going to be involved and score and whatnot, in spite of him being 29 years old and Zach Charbonnet only being 24, 25, whatever he is right now. Okay. Yet, if you look at Keep Trade Cut, you should get something on top of James Conner for Zach Charbonnet. Is that something that you really think makes sense? Is that something that's really going to help you win The Dynasty League? No, no. So that is easily the first example that I see. Some other guys you could use would be like Ricky Pearsall. All right, here's Ricky Pearsall. Went in the middle of the second round for many of our rookie drafts this past year. Obviously, he sustained the gunshot wound and then came back. So kudos to him for making that recovery and getting back in the lineup and out onto the field. That was an amazing recovery. But unfortunately, once he did get on the field, didn't do so much, right? And this is with Brandon Ayuk going out for the season for 2/3 of the year, right? I definitely had I had Ricky Pearsall on any of my rosters. I'm a Seminoles fan, so sorry, Ricky, had to pass. But you, I really, I have nothing against Ricky Pearsall individually, but dynasty wise, I do. I I don't want him on my roster. There's put it this way, right now there's absolutely no way I would trade for him. If he was sitting there on free agency, sure. Then I pick him up, okay? But he's not going to be. He's too valuable, right? Who would you rather have, Ricky Pearsall or Adam Thielen? Ricky Pearsall or I could Jacoby Myers. Right now, you should be able to get something on top of Jacoby Myers for Ricky Pearsall. Do you think that's a wise move? See where I'm getting at with this? And what you need to do is sit down, and I'm just throwing Keep Trade Cut out there because it's the easiest go to for dynasty rankings and it's crowdsourced. I know that we go on there and we just hit through whatever, but when I go on there, I do take 10 seconds to actually look at the three names and I pick the guy that I like the best. The other two options, yeah, I picked the second best, I think, in the last one. So it's not like it's some ridiculous site here. We do use it and it does make sense. And it's very user biased, okay? Like recency bias plays into it. However, our our mind in Dynasty is just like naturally geared towards youth and it crushes the value of a lot of veterans in the off season, like James Conner, for instance. Right now, you're not going to get you're going to be lucky to get a second for him if you try. All right, or you'd be lucky to yes. If you wanted to get a second rounder for James Conner right now, you'd be lucky with this draft that's coming up. That's loaded at the running back position. Be very tough to get James Conner. But James Conner is the exact reason for this series. Okay. Jacoby Myers is the exact reason for what I'm talking about here. They have absolutely no artificial dynasty value whatsoever. They've sucked it all out of them because they're 28, 29 years old. And it goes on, I mean, Jerry Judy was almost basically this, and then all of a sudden he decided to start playing this year. Um, who else? Cortland Sutton had it for a few years. Now this year he showed up. Terry McLaurin had it for a few years as well. All right. Now all of a sudden he got a quarterback and boom, there it is. And now he's basically undervalued. All right. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your taxi squad in particular this off season, and look at the guys on there. And even if you took them in the second round, third round, or fourth round of your rookie drafts last season, just because you spent that second rounder does not guarantee that guy a roster spot for you this next season. All right. Don't fall into that sunk cost fallacy. And that part plays part of this artificial dynasty value. Sure, it's good to have the value on your roster, but you need to know what to do with it. If you have a guy like this that's overpriced because of artificial dynasty value, get rid of them. That's the whole point. Maximize your value that you have. Number two are guys who produced due to injury. Now, we had obviously a ton of injuries this season, right? And one of the guys right from the get go who took advantage of that was Jordan Mason, right? Any Christian McCaffrey owner can tell you how much they love Jordan Mason for what he was able to pull off for them this year, right? You can add Isaac Garendo, Isaac Garendo. But let me ask you this. What is the real difference between Jordan Mason and Isaac Garendo or Will Shipley and Kenny Gainwell? Well, I'll tell you what the difference is because I'll bring it up for you right now. You ready? Here we go. Now I'm going to put the trade together and I'll show you the difference just to show you how ridiculous artificial dynasty value can be. There. You see it? 2,600 points. I'm telling you, it's nuts. All right. It's crazy. Both of these sets of backup running backs are so similar, yet so different at the same time. Look at these guys that you'd need to add to even this trade out. That Keep Trade Cut is saying would even this trade out. They're saying that you need to add Russell Wilson, a starting quarterback, to equal this out. That's insane. For two backup running backs versus two backup running backs. The point being, both of these teams, the Eagles and the Niners, have superstar RB1s. McCaffrey on one side, Barkley on the other, right? Both of which have been extremely injury prone. There's no other way to put it. Okay. Saquon could have just as easily gone down early in September and not even sniffed 2,000 yards, right? But he did. He played. And what did that do? That hurt the value of Will Shipley and Kenny Gainwell. What if the roles flipped? What if Saquon had a nagging injury and was going into Sunday, week 1, and then all of a sudden didn't play, and Kenny Gainwell came out and busted out 100-yard, 2-touchdown performance, and then went on to dominate for 7 or 8 weeks to the tone of being an RB1 to the point where people were giving up first rounders for him. And then all of a sudden, Saquon comes back in week 9 or 10, right? Then Saquon goes down again 2 weeks later and only plays 4 games. But meanwhile, Gainwell gets injured as well. And then Will Shipley slides in and is the RB1 for the Eagles for the rest of the season. Do you think that Will Shipley and Kenny Gainwell's value would be pretty much flip-flopped with Mason and Garendo right now? Hell yeah. And so that's exactly what I'm getting at. If you can dip on Jordan Mason and Isaac Garendo, if you didn't do it during the regular season, you can still do it now and gain for what they produced this last season and will very likely never produce again. All right. Both Mason and Garendo are just were in the right place at the right time, and they will very likely never come close to what they did this season. Yet Shipley and Gainwell are dirt cheap right now, and they could easily, one of them could do what Jordan Mason did this past season. All right. So that is a classic example of ADV right now. So keep that in mind when you're dealing, especially with backup running backs behind like volume monsters that get 75% of the touches. I'm talking like the backups in Green Bay, the backups in Houston right now. Okay. Teams that have true bell cow running backs, their backups should all literally be worth 1,500 on keep trade cut. Like it's just a flat line because the only value is if the guy ahead of them gets hurt. That's the only way they're valuable. And then they're getting a shitload of touches, and yeah, I'd start them that week for sure. All right. So it's not that Jordan Mason was anything special. He just was in the right place at the right time. There's a lot of running backs that could have done what Jordan Mason did. I'm not saying Jordan Mason sucks. All right. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve a roster spot because he does. He's CMC's backup, and CMC has shown to be injury prone, but so has Josh Jacobs. All right. Sorry. Just watching some highlights here. Sports Center. Anyway, what the main thing is find those gaps and see your overvalued player and try and gain something for it. All right. If you have Jordan Mason, go ahead and hit up the CMC owner. I'm sure he's scared shitless about CMC right now, but he knows he can't trade him. So he's stuck with him. But I'm sure he wouldn't mind having Jordan Mason going into next season, now knowing that Jordan Mason has done something. Okay. Just don't be surprised when he turns into Elijah Mitchell. Next up, the third version of ADV. Guys with perceived assumption to outproduce what they've actually done so far in their careers just because of a free agency signing, or usually this is what I want to stick to is the free agency signings. Now it doesn't mean that they shifted teams necessarily. It could be somebody coming to their organization as well. So specifically think Kirk Cousins last year and what he did to Drake London and Kyle Pitts' value, right? Kyle Pitts, talk about some ADV. Granted, Pitts was a monster, and he was a monster at the combine. He was a freak, and he had us all excited in that draft. People were taking him second, third overall in that draft, ahead of Jamar Chase. Okay. But then what happened? He dominated his rookie season, not like Brock Bowers, but he did dominate. He got over 1,000 yards, not too many touchdowns. Went into the second season with even more hype to build on that first season. And ever since then, he's crashed down, except when Kirk Cousins signed last March with the Falcons, right? Half of you out there, I know, were intrigued and were very excited about what was going on there in Atlanta, especially for Kyle Pitts. Drake London, eh, I don't have a problem with where Drake London's value went. Okay. Now, in redrafts, the Drake London hype went maybe a little bit, and maybe I'm thinking more so in underdogs, where Drake London was pumped up all the way into the back end of the first round in some cases. Generally, he was a second round pick in most underdogs last year, but just saying the hype for Drake London went to a point where it almost got out of control, where people were predicting like possibility of top five numbers there. Now I get it. Kirk Cousins hyper focuses in on a guy, which he did with Justin Jefferson, but it's because Jefferson kind of deserved it. So Drake London, though, not so much ADV. Kyle Pitts, on the other hand, lots of ADV. Kyle Pitts is like he was basically droppable in redrafts this year. And then you compare him to, let's bring it up right now, his former teammate, Jonnu Smith. Kyle Pitts, tight end 10. Jonnu Smith, tight end 16. Okay. Bring it up so you guys can see it out there. There we are. So Jonnu Smith just came through with a top 5 or 6 tight end season. Kyle Pitts, on the other hand, did he crack the top 20? Now, granted, Kyle Pitts is 5 years younger. I'll give you that. Okay. However, who would you be more willing to bet on has a bigger season next year? Right? I'd say it's at least 50-50 right now. It's a toss up, honestly. And if I had to bet on it, I would bet on Jonnu because, well, when they were in Atlanta together, Jonnu was the one who seemed to be getting the more valuable touches. 100% certain. I'm not even going to look at it, but I am very certain Jonnu outscored him. He had more touchdowns, that's for sure. So this is just one example. Now, it might not be the best example. If I can look at the other tight ends here, I might be able to find a better one to match up with. Uh, Here. Okay. So those might not have been the best examples. However, if you go further down the tight end board here, I have a couple of perfect guys right here. You have Ben Sinnott and JT Sanders versus Cole Kmet and Dallas Goddard. Now, who do you think is going to score more points next season? JT Sanders or Ben Sinnott or Cole Kmet or Dallas Goddard? I mean, I'm 90% certain that Cole Kmet and or Dallas Goddard will outscore either of those two tight ends. All right. I like what JT Sanders pulled off this year, and I like what Bryce Young has going for him. But he also has Tommy Tremble there. He's also got like 3 other wide receivers. You got Coker, Thielen, Leggett, and some other dudes. And there's going to add 1 or 2 other receiving options in the draft. So who knows what they'll do in free agency. Point being, JT Sanders, I like him better than Ben Sinnott right now. But Ben Sinnott, I mean, did did he even get 15 targets on the season? So, like, for him to be sitting at tight end 19, I mean, look at some of these tight ends that he's ahead of right now. I mean, Ben Sinnott and Noah Gray, Ben Sinnott, Brenton Strange, Ben Sinnott or Chigo Konku, Ben Sinnott or Theo Johnson. Like, I could go. I'll take any of these dudes. I mean, Ben Sinnott is essentially Michael Mayer right now, and even Michael Mayer is like the poster child for what I'm getting at. What point one was the second and third year players that are just haven't done anything, and Mayer's finally fallen, but he just now is equal to the 29-year-old Mike Gesicki. And, you have Noah Fant way down here. These tight end rankings are just, I get it when you get down to this range, they're all pretty much the same, right? Well, not really. Like, Noah Fant definitely outproduced Cade Stover this year. Um, Mike Gesicki definitely outproduced most of those dudes right around there. Hunter Henry is the one that stands out to me the most out of any of these tight ends on the page. Yet he is probably perceived as the least likely guy that you're going to want, right? When the reality is Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki are the two guys on this page that you should be trading for because they've shown it, and the tight end position takes time, a lot of time usually for guys to get it. Now, the way that the rookies have been producing lately with Bowers and Laporta the year before, you kind of starting to, I think the average guy is starting to expect that from rookies. But the reality is tight end usually does take a couple of seasons to figure things out. So that's the issue, and you have to realize that when you're looking at the tight end position, that do you do you really want to just sit on that zero week after week after week, or sit on this tight end that's gonna be something? Okay, why don't you let somebody else waste a roster spot on that and just roster somebody like Hunter Henry or Gasecki who you can actually play and is going to score points? Just one way to look at it. That's how I'm feeling about it. And that's what ADV, artificial dynasty value, is all about. It's all about the perception and hopium versus actual points and winning championships. And that's what I'm getting to in my Moneyball series. Last week, of course, Brad Pitt came up on the screen and he's messing around crunching numbers with Jonah Hill. And I can't, anytime Moneyball comes on, I'm stuck. I got to watch the rest of it. Just like Christmas Vacation or Ace Ventura. What are you going to do? You got to watch, right? So, anyway, be sure to check me out on the Patreon at patreon.com/Birdhouse Dynasty Show for our updated rankings, as well as any questions, direct them to buymeacoffee.com/Birdhouse Dynasty Show. Thanks for checking out our series. We'll be back next week with part 2. And just remember, never stop working.